It is really wonderful to be here today for this panel session at the OASC City by City conference. My name is Dr. Amy Hochadel, and I am the Director of Global Business at Connected Places Catapult, located in London, England. And today we have a very exciting panel discussion on empowering African cities with urban innovations. And we have quite a breadth and depth of knowledge and expertise from across the African continent, as well as from investors and interested developers from around the world. By way of introduction, our panel today includes Mr. Ajiv Maharaj, the Director of Economic Development from the city of Durban. Welcome, Ajiv. Dr. Moges Tadesse, the Chief Resilience Officer in the city of Addis Ababa. Welcome, Doctor. We also have Akira Saito with us, the Head of Innovation and Digital Transformation for SoftBank Telecom Europe. Welcome, Akira. Very nice to see you. And I believe we will be joined by two other colleagues as the conversation progresses, and that's Mr. Geofrey Ochieng from the city of Kisumu in Kenya, as well as Mr. Kennedy Mubita from Standard Chartered Bank in Africa, and we hope that they'll be joining us soon. So, to get started, before I hand it over to our panelists to hear about the activity that they're engaged in across African cities and urban innovations, I'd like to take just a short few minutes of moderator's prerogative, if I may, and I will set the context for the program that has enabled this conversation, Urban Links Africa, a program that is run by Connected Places Catapult across Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Kigali and Tanzania. So I will share my screen and give you a brief overview of the program to set the context for our discussions for the rest of the hour. And if I might just request that our panelists, for the moment, keep your microphones on mute. And then when we begin our discussion, if you can take that off mute, that would be great. So let me tell you just a little bit about Urban Links Africa and the program that the Catapult has been running there for the past year and a half with our partners across the African continent, as well as innovators and entrepreneurs that have formed very equitable and enriching partnerships across the two places. So, a bit of an overview about the program. So, the objective of Urban Links Africa is really all about making connections between innovators in Africa and innovators in the UK. This program is meant to bring our innovators together. We know that there are various expertise that the UK has, but that innovation in Africa is extremely advanced, very creative, and really focused on addressing challenge-based solutions and bringing those tangible solutions to market. And so the goal was to create those equitable partnerships between innovators and entrepreneurs that we can scale up these solutions across cities in Africa. And in doing so, we launched an open call for innovation companies, both in Africa and the UK, to pair up, to form joint ventures, and to address specific city challenges that each of our 6 cities has identified by people on the ground, by those stakeholders that are living and working in those cities. We also formed a UK-Africa collaboration platform, an online platform. And while I believe that this type of platform is now integral to any project, it certainly became invaluable given the situation with COVID. What it has allowed us to do is to keep innovation happening. If we didn't have this platform, and it's a very dynamic, very innovative platform, and called Urban Links Africa, if you'd like to look for it, but it gives a place that our innovators can connect to each other, given their disparate geographies, given the lack of ability to travel, and this has become really critical. It's a safe space. They can share IP, they can share data, they can develop their solutions for context for those cities. And that has allowed us to continue with our innovation process during this difficult time. And then in addition to that, we think it's absolutely critical that our cities and our tech hubs and African cities and African tech hubs are sharing our information. And so we have set up some very peer-to-peer learning groups, also now operating on that platform, but that city leaders, for example, procurement officers in Kisumu can talk to procurement officers in Belfast. Tech hubs that are in Nairobi can talk to tech hubs that are in Bristol, and we can learn from each other in a very tangible and practical way. And while the platform is enabling that, it's those relationships that are really creating a foundation so that our innovators that are creating those developments will be able to soon deploy them on the ground when we're all able to see each other again in person. But because of those relationships with the cities and the tech hubs, these relationships will go on for quite some time. They will become embedded across our cities and African cities so that we see long-term impact and engagement for this project. So let me tell you a bit more about the 7 challenges to give you an idea. When we talk about innovation, innovation is a very broad topic, and it can really mean any of the challenges that cities are facing. And so we worked with city stakeholders across Kenya and South Africa to identify what some of the challenges are that they're facing that technology and innovation could be applied to and can facilitate. In Kenya, our 3 cities selected 4 areas that they wanted to work together on collectively. And you see those 4 areas there. And I think that these 4 areas will be, it doesn't matter which continent, which country, which city you're living in. These are common themes for cities all around the world that we are facing. Issues of urban flooding, solid waste management, transportation and mobility, active mobility in particular. Every city is grappling with these types of challenges all around the world. So what is happening in Kenya is going to be really critical for cities all around the world to learn from. And then when we look at our partners in South Africa, each of those cities selected to work on an individual challenge. And of course, we know again that some of these, all of these challenges are again challenges cities everywhere are facing. And so we're quite excited to see the outputs of what the innovations and the partnerships can form in terms of looking at resilience in informal settlements. This is going to be a critical issue moving forward, especially as challenges like health and pandemics, climate change become ever more prevalent. We need to make sure that those amongst us in settlements, in cities, in informal settlements, across our cities all have the essence of both resilience and innovation. And of course, urban mobility, all cities are facing multiple challenges. These tie into issues across the city and across sectors. Urban mobility is tied to urban planning. Urban mobility and urban planning are tied to net zero and climate change. So we'll see a real interaction amongst all of these issues. And I think it's quite exciting what these cities have identified and what they'll be working on. So the 5 key areas for Urban Links Africa during this phase of the work have been to form those partnerships with the innovators, develop the proof of concepts, and work together to get that technology and innovation deployment ready so that when we can travel again, we're ready to deploy these solutions on the ground, to connect our hubs and African hubs to each other for learning, to develop the platforms where we can share market intelligence and as a knowledge repository so that everyone has access to the learnings and the challenges and the lessons that everyone else is going through. To create a business advisory board, because we know that the private sector will play a critical role in making sure that some of these solutions and these developments in cities will go forward. It will take absolutely a strong commitment from the private sector, which I hope, and we'll hear from Akira and others later, also see a real investment opportunity, especially when you're talking about innovation in Africa. And then to make sure that we're aligned with achieving the impact that we want to achieve, that we're making cities a better place for people to live and work and play, and that we're also aligning that to sustainable development goals. We have to make sure that what we're doing is at minimum causing no harm, but in essence, helping to move us closer towards things like net zero activity. So, where we are now in our program is just about coming to the end of the first phase of the development of the solutions. Our next phase after March will be the deployment of the solutions. And so we're entering quite an exciting time in the project. And I want to make this real for you. So I'm going to just briefly tell you about some of the solutions that our partnerships have come up with. And so when you're looking at, for example, Cape Town, we have a partnership between two organizations, one from the UK, one from South Africa, that are looking at a registry of how do we get informal settlements, land titles, understand who's using the land, records, so an informal type of registry solution. And this is something that we're still doing across the UK as well. When you look at Durban and you look at solutions around solid waste management and creating the infrastructure and the systems that create upcycle waste, how do we turn these into useful products and reuse them is a critical challenge that a lot of cities are looking at. Next, in terms of Johannesburg, looking at the infrastructure around mobility, and of course we know this is all part of the system of systems approach to how we look at cities. And so really having good dynamic data visualization becomes critical when we're trying to understand how all of these interact with each other. Now, if we turn to Kenya, we see similar and innovative solutions there across Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nairobi, collectively looking at things around the Internet of Things, sensors that can help us better understand waste management and water management, looking at flood mapping, better analyzing of data so that we can predict things in advance and stop urban flooding in areas where we have residents and businesses. Looking at AI and the use of AI and how we can also automate, track, and monitor solid waste management will become critical. And I think issues, for a lot of us working in the innovation space, we hear the buzzwords of IoT, the Internet of Things. We hear AI thrown around a lot. We hear blockchain, and they are all important innovations. But it's when you see them in this context, how is AI being used to track and monitor solid waste? It really brings the solution aspect to that to life for us to understand the impact that things like IoT, AI, blockchain, and others can have in a city where people are living. So with that, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the impact we've had, and then we're going to begin our conversation. So we've had huge amount of interest, multiple stakeholders across not just the 6 cities that are deploying technologies, but our 9 cities across as Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania as well involved in this project. And we hope that those cities will now become the next step to identify a city challenge and develop city solutions. We've created 7 partnerships where UK companies and African companies are now engaged in a contract to develop and deploy their technology in Africa. So this is new business that has been created through this project. We've engaged universities across the UK and Africa to also understand the research side that goes along with this. How can we also take new innovations coming out of our world-class academic institutions and then turn those into the next level of innovations on the ground? We've engaged with a cohort of 9 cities, and we've built a platform that has nearly 300 users now. And for that platform, I would say that the critical component there is how dynamic it is. This is not the type of, we're not Facebook, thankfully, and we're not looking for millions upon millions of users. What we are looking for are cohorts of committed innovators and entrepreneurs that are willing to work together on a platform to develop solutions. And so we're looking at numbers in the hundreds that are more critical than thousands to create those types of solutions. But then it's also important to have the strategic partners. We know that there are organizations working across Africa and the UK that are critical to enabling these types of activities, like UN Habitat, the Council of Governors in Kenya, AfriLabs, coordinating the tech hubs across all of Africa, and the UK government as well involved in this. So I think you can see that we have quite an exciting project, a real sense of tangible impact, things happening on the ground that will improve the lives of people living in those areas, but will also create investment opportunities and business growth and economic development for those areas. So with that, I think the much more interesting part of this conversation today will be to hear from our guests. And so I'm going to ask, after I just get rid of my presentation here, and I'm going to turn it over to some questions. And if I can start with, if our panelists can turn their microphones back on, and we'll have everyone ready here, and we can have some questions. So, welcome to all of my panelists today. First, I'd like to start with a few questions to those representatives who are with the cities that are represented here today. So if I could start possibly with Ajiv, Mr. Maharaj in Durban. Could you tell us a little bit, give us the view from on the ground, what's happening within data policy in the city and the infrastructure agenda in the city of Durban? Paint a picture for us.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So I think for Durban, like many of the other South African cities, or many of the cities around the world, I think there's two aspects to this discussion. One is an internal facing policies that relate to the organization, the city itself, and then how the city interacts with its citizens and business and investors. So back in 2010, the city rolled out ahead of the 2010 FIFA World Cup. We rolled out about 2,500 kilometers of fiber, and that kind of that formed the backbone of the city's IT infrastructure, which it uses for its own purposes, but also starts to extend access to particularly your poorer areas. So that's one of the key challenges, I think, for most developing cities is how do we extend access to poorer communities that don't have connectivity and in many cases cannot afford connectivity. So that's one of the critical challenges that we've started to address. There are currently we've got things like libraries, hospitals, schools, all of those that are connected into the city's network and then are provided with kind of free access to the internet. The other part of it, more kind of also inward focusing, is trying to improve the way in which we do business. So Durban participates along with many other cities in the World Bank's doing business survey. And part of improving the way we attract investment and making it easier and cheaper to do business in the city is to improve our own internal systems. For example, starting to move all processes online so that there are no manual processes. Also, starting to integrate the property value chain. So there are so many aspects to the property value chain that cities interact with, but what we find is it's often very disintegrated. So your revenue generation component sits separately, your GIS and your property information sits separately, and just by integrating all of that information, I think there's a huge benefit that we can certainly get from data and the analytics that come out of having integrated data.
I think that's really interesting, and two key points that really caught my attention there, Ajiv. One, and one of those points is a little bit of an outlier, but you mentioned the FIFA World Cup games, and certainly there are a lot of cities around the world that get these type of opportunities, an opportunity for an event or to invest in a piece of infrastructure, and what they are able to do with that is critical. And there are a lot of cities that have fared well and some that have not. But I think what your point there around using that as an opportunity to extend services to those that might not otherwise have them is also really critical, because I think one of the most important things that we need to consider when we're talking about innovation and city solutions is that we need to make them available to all. And we will have done a great disservice if we don't use innovation in the capacity of improving lives for all citizens. So I think.
Hello, Ami.
Hello.
Ami.
Yes, Mr. Ochieng. Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry for interruption. I want to step out for a few minutes.
Please.
Something is pressing.
Please do, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, and then I think the other key point, Ajiv, that you've mentioned that I think is critical for a lot of cities to think about, and I think we'll hear from Kennedy and Akira on this as well, is what makes cities interesting for investment opportunities. And you've said a critical piece there, which is that cities need to invest in their own internal systems as much as trying to attract investment. To do that, you have to make yourselves an easy and appealing place to do business in order to attract that. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask Mr. Mubita and Akira about those as well. Let me turn to Dr. Tadesse. Can you tell us a little bit about what the city of Addis Ababa is working on in terms of the digitalization strategy and perhaps some of the flagship programs that you're thinking of in this space? You're on mute.
Thank you very much. I think Addis Ababa is using, some of the electronic infrastructures in order to make, the services that are provided to the wider public to be, very efficient. So as a strategy, Addis Ababa focuses on most likely building a people-centered, inclusive, development-oriented information society. So that was our most important strategic pillar, because we have a number of challenges that we need to resolve in the upcoming, particularly 10 years time, particularly in digitizing, the services provided to the community or to the residents of Addis Ababa. So recognizing the role that digital technology can play in enhancing, public services delivery system to the residents of Addis Ababa and also to the businesses. I think the city has recently launched, several e-government services. Of course, this is in line with the national e-government strategy. For instance, I can mention, the mGov platform, which has been already introduced in 2017, now allows the citizens of Addis to access information via or through their mobile devices on more than 500 public services which are existing in Addis Ababa, and this may also include utility bills, taxes, and bus routes, and also exam results in higher institutions. With regard to our future priority or flagship projects that has already been launched and also planned to be launched in the upcoming 10 years, can be mentioned as follows. For instance, Addis Ababa is planning to invest in innovation and technology, such as e-government, governance, e-services, electronic banking, e-learning, e-transport, e-tax system, e-database management, and also electronic health improvement system, which has already been launched very recently, and also e-financing, and also intelligent transport systems, digitization of the driving license for road safety, and also for system efficiency as well. And of course, we are planning to invest on digital jobs, digital skills, and digital currencies, and so on and so forth. So in this case, the role of ICT is immense, or is very, very essential in building the digital economy for the upcoming 10 years in Addis Ababa. And this has really has a very, very crucial relevance in terms of impacting the livelihood of the residents of Addis. And also, you know, recently, for instance, I can mention Ethiopia has generally launched a digital health innovation and learning center in Addis Ababa with the purpose of data development and also demand-driven health system improvement. And on top of this, the Ethiopian Revenue Customs Authority, which we call it ERCA, also launched the electronic tax register system in Addis Ababa in 2008. And this will allow, this has already allowed the automated collection of sales data, and also in terms of cutting the burden of administration, and also reducing the tax evasion and improving the data quality in the system. So if we take also, you know, higher institutions, for example, you know, Addis Ababa University has introduced e-learning platforms to ensure, you know, the quality of education. And here in Addis, we have also 2 mega ICT projects, even, you know, equivalent in terms of, you know, standardization to some of the African cities, and this ICT project has already been, you know, created in Addis, particularly the Warada net and also the school net, which is meant to connect district level government administration, and also you know, to connect the schools across the country. And this is having, you know, higher impact, and of course the impact is very positive, encouraging, and enormous. I think these are the things which I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tadesse. And I think you've touched on something that's really critical, especially for these times, as we are all here on a Zoom call and not in person, given the pandemic. The challenge of cities to need to digitalize so many services at the moment, I think, is a critical issue and a critical challenge. And we know that those cities that have started to embark on that journey are faring better in delivering services and city services and serving their citizens during this difficult time. But it's going to be critical for all cities to improve and standardize the digitalization of services. I have a question that's going to be for you, Dr. Tadesse, and also for Ajiv and for Mr. Ochieng, but and that's around citizen engagement in all of these projects. But first, before I pose that, welcome, Geofrey. Thank you for joining us. I hope everything is well there. We'd like to hear a bit about what's going on in Kisumu and what your plans are. And can I say, I think that cities like Kisumu, Mombasa, Durban, what some people would be calling these secondary cities, are really, in some instances, more important at the moment, because that's where the pace of urbanization is growing the most. And so quite interested to hear, Mr. Ochieng, what is happening there on the ground in Kisumu, and what some of your plans are.
Thank you very much, Ami. And thank you for my co-panelists in this discussion of innovation and city development. As for Kisumu City, as you rightly put it, it's a secondary city. And as you rightly put it as well, the urbanization frontier is happening even in smaller cities. It's not like the trajectory of Europe and America, where we have big cities. Ours tend to be more or less medium and small scale cities. But all the same, the urbanization trajectory is moving very fast. And in Africa, as a tier for urbanization for the next 100 years, because probably Europe and America is saturated, so to speak, as far as urbanization is concerned. But in our setup, it is growing very fast. Cities are growing really, really very fast, both in terms of size, issues of sprawl and population moving into the city, and also the inward population just multiplying at a very high rate. So the challenges are becoming even more grievous by the day, because we have the structure, the demographics of our cities is that a lot of people are young. And with the youth population, we have a potential there as far as innovation is concerned and all that. But however, we also have a challenge if we don't create opportunities for this youthful population. And we all know it that agitations, especially uprisings, normally start within cities. So as an African city, we are alive to that fact, although probably we may not be moving at the at the same pace as the rate of urbanization. So I would admit that, for example, Kisumu, we are lagging behind. We are not really up to speed, but I would like to point out that we are making plans, and we've tried certain innovations or certain innovation solutions to help us in service delivery and collection of revenue and is concerned. And one of them that I will like to talk about, which we are keen on, is the business application approval system. One platform where all the businesses across the city and even beyond can be registered, can be monitored, and to the extent that a businessman who is coming from far-flung area does not have to travel to a central position. In as much as we're also decentralizing the service delivery points, but eventually we are moving towards a scenario where we reduce the human to human interface. And that one is also coming very important at this time of COVID, where you realize that a lot of services can be given remotely, and people don't need to travel to offices, either the employees or the service, those who are seeking for services. And so as a city, we are very keen on that, so that we develop a platform that our businesses, citizens can interact with the city authorities and get, for example, business permits, renewal of such. They can apply for development application. For example, if you want to do a residential housing or a commercial development, you know, your plans, architectural plans, structural plans have to go through some approval system. We check the quality before you embark on construction. And we want to do that as well on an e-platform. Another service delivery point will be collection of rates. This is basically the taxes that the citizens pay as they enjoy the services the city has to offer. And we are rolling out a valuation role to help us manage land rates across the city. It will be across the city and across the region to help us in collection of land rate taxes, just to spruce up our revenue collection system. So in a nutshell, that is the platform that as a city we are actively pursuing at the moment. I will maybe ours is not as impressive as probably.
Can everyone else still hear me?
Yes.
Addis Ababa, Addis is on another level, as well as Durban. But we are cognizant in offering solutions. And some of the solutions that we proposed, some of the issues that cities in Kenya grapple with, like you say, solid waste management, stormwater, evacuation and management, all that, traffic management. You realize with a young population and sometimes there's some growth of middle class, they want to acquire cars, or with a public transport system that is not really efficient, people tend to be pushed to buy cars, not because they like cars, but they're just trying to create a means of transport
might need to interject there.
and the wastewater management, those open to having solutions. Okay,
Geoffrey,
are we?
we're losing your signal a little bit. Let me just interject there and say, I think there's some really critical points you've brought up. A couple of points that really ring true with me. Something that you've brought up that I know others on this panel are dealing with: the young demographics of our cities.
Yes.
All across Africa, we have young demographics that are impacting both the unemployment rate and the rate of growth. And I think with that young demographic, and I think both Kennedy and Akira will also have something to say about this, we see both opportunity and challenge. We have a population that's ready to be upskilled and developed to be a more innovative and digital population, and yet we have to make sure that we have the services in place to do that. And so I think the question around secondary cities is really a critical one, because it's those cities that will need to grapple with this the most. But it also is in those cities where I think what we might hear Kennedy and Akira say, we see a lot of potential for investment and opportunity in the future in those cities, whereas other cities are already, you can go to Nairobi and you can figure out how to do business there, but you'll be competing against a lot of people. Now, if you go to Kisumu, you might have the opportunity to really engage in some innovative business enterprises where there might be less competition. So we'll see what Akira and Kennedy have to say about that in a minute. I also want to point out something that you were talking about, which is the ease of doing business. And again, I think this is going to be a critical factor. So if we can digitalize our cities, whether we're primary or secondary cities, and if we can help to streamline the ease of doing business, then we're creating really fertile ground for those investors and those business partnerships, regardless of where you are on your journey, at the beginning or middle, or whether you feel that you're advanced. I think that the point of the journey is not as important as the opportunity potential and the ease of doing business in a place that presents folks like investors and developers with an interest to come to those places. And of course, things like rates collection is a very top of the list. Cities need the financial capacity to do these things. And innovation and technology enable things like rate collection to allow you to do that. So it's all connected. I'd like to, I want to ask you one more question before I bring in Akira. I've already kind of posed questions to Akira and Kennedy about the opportunities in the space. And in fact, let's go there now quickly. Let's bring in Akira. Can you start, please, and just talk a bit about the role of SoftBank, perhaps some examples of flagship programs you've been engaged with across Europe and your interest in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. And I'd like to thank everyone who's here for having me. And I just have to say, you mentioned investment a lot, and SoftBank is often associated in the context of investment. But I come from the digital transformation section, so I can only sort of speak in that regard. We have been working closely with a number of cities, both in Japan and globally. However, we are still at opportunity discovery stage in Africa, so I can only speak with a limited expertise in Africa. But our collaboration ranges from providing like rural agricultural solutions to autonomous driving cars and buses, from building a technology park to robotic delivery and cleaning solutions. But what runs through all of these activities is our mission to sort of working towards achieving SDGs and bringing happiness to everyone by information revolution. And a lot of people sort of mentioned about successful digital transformation, but I think it does not necessarily come from implementing new technologies, but from reshaping the organizations and to take advantage of existing assets and existing strategic plans in a new way. So I would like to think that we should focus more on the how rather than what, And we have to think about always on to whom we are doing this for. So yeah, I think you mentioned about citizen engagement. So we talk about that in that context. With our Swedish partner, we are providing easy to use problem reporting app service to more than 150 European municipalities, so that municipalities can manage their assets and collect complaints, requests, or whatever feedback from its inhabitants. We are helping municipalities with both small and large scale with relatively small budget. And we're providing this service to, I guess, across many countries in Europe, so that they can engage with the citizens and bring better quality of life, and at the same time making municipalities work more efficiently.
I really appreciate that. And one thing that sticks with me there is about digitizing existing services. And a lot of times innovation isn't about creating something that no one's ever heard of before. It's about making something better that already exists. And I think when we look at cities for hundreds of years, they know how to deliver city services. What we're talking about is to make it better, faster, serve more people, ease of doing business. And that's where innovation and technology and digitization can really begin to transform our cities. But however, you're also correct in saying that unless we're tying this directly to the SDGs, we're not going to have the type of world that we want to live in. So it's imperative that we think about the sustainable development goals when we're thinking about improving our cities. Kennedy, let me bring you in. Standard Chartered has been working quite a bit across Africa, has extensive experience across Africa. Can you tell me a little bit about, how does the bank promote urban innovation in Africa, and what types of things are you looking for in cities and projects when you're working with African partners?
All right, thank you very much. And I guess, unlike what my previous colleague mentioned, I work for SC Ventures, which is a unit of Standard Chartered Bank that's focused on facilitating innovation and culture change. And I think both of those terms are critical. As you know, as you mentioned earlier, we have been in Africa for over 100 years, and we have a 160-year, we're 160 years old as an entity. And in some countries, Standard Chartered used to be the central bank before independence, and then also helped the central bank sort of modernize, and then we stepped away. But we've stayed in Africa. As you know, our motto is here for good, and unlike most of the other global entities that sort of left the continent, we have stayed, and we're still partnering with government. But one of the things that we noticed is that as technology was beginning to get into the commercial side of business, and banking was becoming digitalized and technology was being deployed, is that we were leaving some of the countries that we were operating in behind. And so SC Ventures was particularly set up, not only for Africa, but globally, to help our clients sort of take this journey of transformation, because technology was moving so fast, and it was very difficult for knowledge transfer, and many people were aware of various technology solutions, but did not know how to implement them. And so SC Ventures was therefore set aside, apart from the main bank, so that we could actually look at all our clients and see, how can we assist them in the transformation journey, and how can they use the data and information that they have to make their businesses more efficient. Now, our key clients in Africa have been, of course, the multinationals and the government entities. And in most of the solutions that we were looking at, particularly if you look at, say, the agriculture sector, you find that rather than just solving the commercial layer, which sits on an infrastructure that's been set up to manage a community, and these communities are in cities, small cities, big cities, but I often had to assist and provide enterprise solutions for them to be able to participate in the commercial side of the business. And this happened quickly, of course, on the financial side. Everyone is quite familiar with M-Pesa that enabled a lot of people who were not in the financial services framework for them to be able to participate. And so loans were being given to individuals. And then the other area where governments were not digitalized enough, and they had so much information but they couldn't make decisions out of it because of inability to do so. And also there need to be that transformation and transfer of knowledge for them to be able to start leveraging this information. I'm quite pleased to say that quite a few governments have picked up on that, and I've noted that the key challenges to solving their societal infrastructure challenges were really in three phases. We're looking at the financing of those deployment of technology, and the monitoring of that financing, and this applies both to governments and people who are prepared to provide funding. And if I can just spend a little bit more time on this, we discovered that a lot of the entities that a lot of the projects and entities that are ready to finance projects in Africa were not able to do so because they didn't know how the money was going to be spent, and there wasn't enough data to enable them to make reasoned and to make decisions that were going to achieve the objective that they intended to achieve. And so bringing these bringing issues of like you mentioned IoT at the beginning, being able now to deploy IoT in some of these. Now my lights have gone off, I think. Let me just stand up a little bit. And, it's a motion detector. Sort of
technology. Smart technology.
Yeah, you know, so when we propose solutions and on terms of how to make the projects and the funding and the expenditure and the returns from projects more visible using technology, we have seen a larger interest in multinationals, banks and governments, and willingness, even parliament's willingness to fund certain projects. And then the third point was the pricing. Because there was so much inefficiency in the system, you would find that pricing was very, very high, and therefore some of the people who would actually maybe afford some services within their income levels were not able to do so in the areas of water and electricity, waste management, etc. So coming back to what I wanted to say, we have various projects on the ground currently where we have we're looking at say, and you did say a few things about secondary cities. We're actually working in Nairobi in Kenya with one of the secondary cities that we should be announcing by the end of this month, where we're looking at water management. We are deploying IoT equipment to monitor water distribution, and we have actually deployed quite a few in one of the cities in Nairobi. And what we have discovered is that at the same cost, by reducing water loss, by ensuring that water is paid for when it is delivered, we're actually able to provide water services to a larger area at a reduced cost to the end user. And we're also able to make this project self-financing. So this will solve the issue of financing, because a lot of governments are looking for funding to improve, say, water management or electricity distribution. And because of the inefficiencies, a lot of that funding gets lost. But once you deploy technology and are able to monitor where it is consumed and ensure that there is no wastage, and any leakage or broken pipes, in the case of water, are quickly fixed, the same volume of water, the same energy used to generate that service can actually increase the water provision by about 60%. And that's the numbers that we got from an actual use case. So we're also looking at deploying similar smart grids solutions, say in the electricity provision area or in the solar distribution area. There are funders that are ready to support electricity and solar energy deployment in the hinterland, but they are not aware, that they're not sure about how that is going to be deployed and whether they will be able to achieve their key performance indicators by deploying that cash. And we're now looking at certain projects with the various funders in terms of how they'll be able to monitor whether whether they'll be able to, I think this, whether they will be able to recover the funding, or whether they'll be able to price it correctly, and who is consuming those services. So the deployment of technology to monitor consumption of services will help increase the efficiencies and be help to reduce reduce the price so that only people who actually need to be supported will be supported, and governments will then be able to deploy and manage their budgets towards this kind of services. Now, my colleague from Addis Ababa did give a lot of examples of how digital is assisting, is being targeted to be used to assist various communities. And I can only echo his words, because those are the key projects and key proof of concept ideas that we are working through to try and find solutions for these particular cities. For the coastal cities, we're looking at things like, supporting the importation of the import process, reducing the inefficiencies there, because there are a lot of demerit charges that are done there. The monitoring of those services by staff, when you digitize some of them, you're able to use those resources for other services. And so we are at SC Ventures, I actually manage the investment unit, so we are looking at investing capital into these projects in various cities. We are looking at most of the cities that you have mentioned in Africa. They are all in our purview, including in the Middle East. And we are actually being able to provide business propositions and that can attract investment.
Yes.
And some of these are at various stages of completion, and I'm hopeful that in this year you will be able to hear of various entities and ventures being announced, and starting from this month, in various sectors where we are providing support to these utility services that meet SDG goals, reduce the need for governments to borrow. Because initially the project was, give us all the money first and then we deploy. But now we're able to demonstrate through our proof of concept framework, through our human-centered design framework, that these projects can be self-funding, because there's a lot of profit hidden in the in the overpriced services that have to take account of the inefficiencies in the system.
Now, Kennedy, thank you for that. I mean, you sort of answered my next question. I was going to shift things up a bit here and ask you, Kennedy and Akira, a bit about what are you hearing in terms of what you've heard today from Addis, from Durban, from Kisumu that's really exciting you. And Kennedy, you've touched on some of that, things that are really exciting you, things that you're looking for. But I want to open this up a bit to just say, what would you be asking these cities or tell them that is really exciting you? And I see Davor has also joined us just to indicate we are nearing the end. So I think this is quite exciting. Let's allow Akira and Kennedy to ask some questions of the cities if they're interested. Davor, is that okay?
Of course. I'm just joining. I'm not saying, hey, you guys need to stop. I'm just here to listen, and then yeah.
Good to have you here.
Hello and welcome, everybody.
Thank you so much. Kennedy, do you want to ask anything of Ajiv or Dr. Tadesse or Geofrey?
I was very excited with what my colleague in Addis Ababa talked about, and I could actually start framing projects, because what we do at SC Ventures is that we meet with the city or the entity within the city and just find out what their problem is. We're very problem focused. We know that the tools to resolve those problems are technology, but we normally don't start with the technology. So we basically outline what is your problem, what are your, and how can, what do you think is the solution? What resources do you have from a digital perspective, data perspective? And therefore, like in the city that we are working with, I think we've discussed it a little bit, and I think for my colleague in Kisumu, I'll actually mention the name. The city we're working with is Eldoret City in Kenya, where we've completed a proof of concept process, and we're now analyzing the results of that proof of concept, and then we'll propose a business proposition for them, which should enable them to reduce costs, deliver the service at the same or cheaper price, and still be a business proposition which we can invite, which we ourselves, as Standard Chartered Bank, will invest in, and also invite other investors to invest in. So that prototype can be used practically for anything. And so I mean, for my colleague in Kisumu, because I'm in Nairobi, so we could probably meet anytime when you're available, is, we prioritize, which of your social challenges do you think, are currently quite pressing? And we have a workshop where we brainstorm the challenge and then see, whether there are any levers that we can use to try and resolve those particular challenges. Is it an enterprise solution where we resolve a backend, we digitalize the process, or we use the identity systems in the country to find out, who's paying, and is it a financing solution that we need to structure? We also try to work with the local fintechs because there's a lot of customization that needs to be done. So sometimes if I was to bring solutions from Singapore, where we're headquartered, or from London, which is our head office, they might not be relevant. So a lot of the solutioning involves the underground management teams to explain what challenges they're trying to solve and what they have implemented so far, and then we try to optimize that, because at the end of the day we want to be able to deploy solutions with you at the least cost, generating the most revenue.
Dr. Tadesse, did you want to respond? Or Ajiv, I know both of you have spoken about enterprise-wide solutions along the same lines that Kennedy is speaking about.
Yes, thank you very much. I think when other panelists have presented their idea and their city experiences, I think that served as the city of Addis Ababa as a mirror to look back into our gap and also to draw some lessons and also to capitalize on the existing technologies and also to integrate with some technology providers. And I think getting a technology is not something easy. It requires huge investment and huge resources. So I think having a sustainable partnership with those who are innovating different technologies for African cities challenge as a solution is very, very critical. And I think this partnership and this type of platform has to continue in the future as well. And I think after we are through with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that we can have an observation in terms of maybe technology sharing and also in terms of sharing experiences, knowledge, skill, and so on and so forth with sister cities, including the city of London and others as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Akira, does that strike a chord with you as well in your digitalization work across SoftBank? And I mean, I think one of the things that really strikes a chord with me here is the challenge-led aspect of innovation in Africa that is rapidly increasing digitization and enterprise-wide solutions. Are you feeling that same way?
Yes, I think so. And I believe the more serious the challenge, the greater the room for innovation. And hunger for the status quo leads to disruptive innovation. And I believe there is a service of issuing a virtual address through a mobile phone and delivering mail in Africa. And it may seem like a business that's unique to Africa, where there are people who do not have fixed addresses. But as technology advances, it raises the fundamental question back to us, all of us who live in Europe and in Japan. It's common in Japan or in Europe to have a missio delivery and have it redelivered. And delivering it to the place where the user wants to receive leads to innovation, and it can be used for optimizing logistics and things like that. So I think with the innovation mindset and with the use of technology, we can create something new, and that's what we are interested in Africa.
Really great. We have about a minute left. Ajiv, did you want to come in there with any final thoughts, either from the Durban perspective or really about more broadly enterprise-wide solutions and digitization, which is what you talked about for Durban?
Yeah, I think rather than go into any specific kind of area, I think one of the things that has been lacking is sharing of knowledge and sharing of experience among African cities. And I know Urban Links Africa is about that. For example, we have a platform in South Africa where we share innovations and we learn from our peers on how to do things better. But I think, there's so much of good work happening in the rest of Africa. We really need to have that kind of platform where we can share knowledge, and with the the African Free Trade Agreement and coming into effect, I think there's a lot more business that's going to be happening between African cities and a lot more trade in services. So the scope for collaboration, I think, is huge.
Yes. And can I say that that is absolutely, you're correct. The goal of Urban Links Africa or organizations like OWASC to bring cities together to share these learnings across countries and continents. And I think that really is critical in how we're going to learn from each other. And may I suggest that when we can all travel again, we perhaps meet in Addis and have Dr. Tadesse buy us a coffee at Tamaka Coffee House, which I am sorely missing, not being able to travel. One of my favorite cups of coffee as well. So I believe that brings us near to the closing. Tavor, did you have any closing thoughts before we conclude our session?
Just that I really enjoyed the comments also on kind of the bidirectionality between kind of different contexts, and that the patterns that exist there, and would kind of prioritize a certain innovation there in terms of the problem solution fit. It can actually play a role in different kinds of contexts. I thought it was very insightful. I think it was a great session, and exactly what we kind of look for. So I hope the rest of the event is also kind of interest to the speakers here. We have quite a full schedule ahead of us, so I can't unfortunately spend too much time, but it was a real pleasure, an honor to listen in and to hear all the topics discussed. And if there's anything we can do to help follow up and kind of help we will work through CPC, or you can work directly. Let's see. But I really have to go to the other session, so apologies. Thank you again to the speakers.